Good evening, morning, wherever you are. Decided to give you all a nice little treat of a pre-recorded bit of insanity. So yes, it is I, Bleach-stradamus, looking deep into my crystal ball filled of bleach to decide what 2022 midterms will behold. But we have to go and look at two sets of the most dastardly things possible. The prediction of both the Senate and, more importantly, the governorships of various states. So, yes, we shall start off with the governor's races. So, to give you an idea of how I went about my breakdown, I went through the Real Clear Politics polls and ran my own aggregates, weighted them a little bit differently, and basically, if there was anything that said registered voters, I threw those numbers out, because those are absolutely useless numbers in the grand scheme of things. So, and I think it's worth noting, I would say there's a lot of oversampling of Democrats, typically with the polling, especially a lot of these polls, especially up in the Northeast Corridor, were relying heavily on Quinnipiac. So, without further ado, we shall dive directly into the executive branch of the various states. So, using mapchart.net, we'll begin off with the Republican victories, simply because I've just got the color set already. So I'm going to predict that Ivy will win in Alabama, Dunleavy in Alaska, and Carrie Lake in Arizona. Now, the Lake race in Arizona, she's currently looking at the aggregate slightly behind her opponent. However, given the way things have swung, I'm willing to bet that she will conquer the day. Next, we have Sarah Huckabee Sanders winning Arkansas. DeSantis is in Florida. Christ has no chance, especially after probably the way the debate's going down today. I'm willing to bet she's got little to... Christ, she... kind of Freudian slip, I would guess. Yeah, very, very little chance for Chris to do anything. Kemp is going to beat Stacey Abrams in Georgia. It's probably going to be a slightly closer race than we're currently going to project. But with the spread of 8 points, margin of error at 3.6 aggregate, that still leaves Kemp with a 4.4 predicted advantage. There is no good polling data for Little in Idaho. Iowa, I predict, will go to Reynolds. And in Kansas, the spread's actually currently against the incumbent Schmidt, but I'm going to give him credit for that state as well. Now, the next one, this is where the aggregate again is going in the opposite direction. However, this is almost a too close to call state, and that's Michigan. And I'm going to predict, mostly for the meme of it, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. The state of Michigan will probably go for Dixon rather than Whitmer on paper. However, I am willing to bet that the trunk vote will suddenly come in and save the day for Whitmer, giving her another term of terrible, terrible dictatorship. Nebraska actually had no aggregate polling, and I wasn't going to go digging for it. And Lombardo in Nevada, just given the way that state's going electorally, that's going to be a too close to call, but I'm going to say that it's going to go towards Schmidt, because saying too close to call is kind of a weaselly way of saying, I don't know. And I don't, but screw it. I'm going to say it anyway. So New Hampshire is going to go to Sununu, who's the incumbent. Ohio to Mike DeWine. Oklahoma to Stitt. Oregon, another state which is a little on the too close to call site. I mean, it's with the margin of error, it's minus 1.5 in favor of the Republican. Now, in all actuality, it will probably go towards the Democrats, just given how that state's going. But I have it currently on my list for Republicans, and just to be controversial, I'm going to say Oregon will go to Drazen. In South Carolina, we have McMaster. Incumbent Kristi Noem in South Dakota. Lee in Tennessee. No polling data, but giving the state's historical leaning towards the right and the current economic problems, I think we can safely say Tennessee will go Republican. Texas, I mean, Pancho Vanilla has absolutely no chance. Vermont, I'm going to say, is going to go for Scott. I mean, the aggregate polling has a 31% lead, but I think I messed the mathematics of that up, and I don't care because it's Vermont, the other smaller Wisconsin. Wisconsin itself, probably going to go Democrat, but I decided to give it to Michaels in this. And Wyoming, Gordon, because, well, let's be honest, seeing Wyoming go for any other state is probably a little sus. Now, on the Democrat side, again, because of the palette problems with this particular website, it's just easier to go through by party rather than anything else. So we have California going for Gavin Newsom. Polis winning handily in Colorado. Connecticut, sorry student, you're going to get Lamont. Hawaii will go for Green. Illinois for Pritzker because, well, let's be honest, anyone other than Democrats winning in Illinois is a frickin' joke. I mean, it's going one way and only one way. Maine for Mills. Maryland, the Bay State, which can't drive. I'm predicting to go for Moore because his opposition is essentially not even polling at this point. I mean, it's an 18-point spread. Not as bad as Healy winning Massachusetts. And also going to call Minnesota for Walz. We're getting down to our last few. New Amsterdam for Hochul. Lujan Grisham for New Mexico. Shapiro for Pennsylvania. And I'm also going to say McKee for Rhode Island. Because, well, let's be honest. That's kind of like Illinois in that regard. So, I think that the number of states that are worth kind of paying attention to, or, well, races for governor, are going to be the following. You're going to want to watch out for Arizona. You're going to want to watch out for Kansas, Nevada, Wisconsin, Oregon, and just those are races that are going to be kind of too close to call at this stage with any degree of absolute certitude. All right. So, let's move over to the senators. So this is going to be, I think, a far more interesting set of predictions. And also probably a little more predictable. Again, I went through, looked at the Real Clear Politics predicted spread, took into account of the margin of error, and then I kind of went through and did my own calculations based off of the bit of information, and decided, all right, who do I think's going to win? And also, I'm willing to say races that are going to be a lot closer than necessarily expected. So, because I'm lazy, I'm going to start off with the Democrats this time. So, California, obvious. I mean, if you have a nose on your face and not the right kind of nose, it's going to be blatant that California is going to go for Padilla. Connecticut's going to get Blumenthal again. Schatz for Hawaii. Duckworth for Illinois. Big shock there, right? Van Hollen will take Maryland. He's essentially running unopposed. And the Republican candidate, if you remember back from the primer, barely even had a campaign website. It's rather sad. New Amsterdam will retain Schumer because, well, garbage state gets garbage leadership in the Senate. Leadership. That's a joke. So we will have Wyden in Oregon, Welch taking Vermont, and Murray taking Washington State. Now we're going to switch back to the Republicans. And I think this is with the Democrat states, all these pickups are kind of predictable. Nothing terribly exciting. I mean, if you want a real shock, you'd probably have to figure out how to rewire a microwave and irradiate your entire town. So, Alaska, Tishabaka. I'm sorry. Can't remember her name. Not going to insult you all by trying to pretend. I think she's going to beat the incumbent. I have her at a 3.6% lead. And I'm willing to bet that's going to go even higher by the time the election actually happens. Arizona, I'm going to call for Masters Now, while Kelly has the lead in some polling, it's not going to take into account the current economic numbers, and with it being a negative 1.4 difference between Masters and Kelly, I'm going to throw it to Masters. Arkansas to Boozman, mostly because his opposition has gigantic hands in all of her campaign stuff. And I'm going to actually throw Colorado to O'Day. Most likely wrong, but the reason I'm throwing it to him is going to be simply because the economic numbers are going to change between now and Election Day, and since Republicans typically come out to vote in larger numbers, that it might shift at the 11th hour with the economic reports. That said, I have seen some indications where early voting has kind of leveled the playing field in a lot more ways than expected, so that should be interesting. I'm going to call Florida for Rubio after the assault on one of his campaign staffers. That's going to be great propaganda to shove in the face of the left. Georgia, I'm going to tentatively call for Walker. However, with their first past the post system and having to have a simple majority to win, I could see this going to Warnock if it goes to a runoff, simply because, well, fortification, my friends. But hopefully we'll get a good play out and see how things go. Idaho for Crapo. Indiana for Young. There's no polling. He's the incumbent. So willing to bet there's a heavy lean towards him. Iowa for Charles Grassley. Kansas for Moran. Kentucky for Rand Paul. That's kind of a snoozer, so no shock there. Kennedy is going to be a solid campaign win. Missouri for Schmidt. And then Nevada for Laxalt. Now again, have a negative difference of minus 3.8 for Laxalt. But again, we come back to the campaign or the economic reports, and that's gonna be a big chunk of last minute, aka proper voters. New Hampshire, I'm actually going to call for Bold Duck. Again, partially because I want to be controversial. I think Maggie Hassan will probably eke out a win, but what's the fun in being 100% accurate? North Carolina will probably go for Bud, but I actually have that at a difference of 0%. So it's a dead heat in North Carolina. North Dakota for Hoeven. Ohio for J.D. Vance. Again, it's sitting at a negative 0.2. But I just don't see how that's going to change. Oklahoma, because that is the special election state, I'm going to call for Lankford and Mullen. And you're probably wondering, oh, well, gee, that's predictable. And yes, because neither of the other candidates really seem to be competitive enough. And the fact that we've got a 10% for Lankford And they're not even bothering to poll for the Mullen's opposition, the other horn. That tells you a lot. Pennsylvania, I'm going to call for Amendment Oz. And I think Fetterman's just going to crash and burn at the 11th hour. Things aren't going well. There's some negative information coming out about him. All the normal things that Democrats do that people finally find out almost too late. Scott is going to be a solid lock for South Carolina, another state where there is almost zero polling. Thune for South Dakota, he's being polled at 21%. Mike Lee in Utah. And Wisconsin, I'm going to throw to Johnson. So, that is the entire Senate prediction. Now, in my opinion, the Republicans are going to have 23 governorships from this election. Democrats will have 13 House seats, and then the Democrats are going to have 10 Senate wins, and the Republicans will have 25. Now, I will say, just for the sake of thoroughness, I'll kind of go through and show. Ooh, well, maybe I won't, because this is a horrific mess. Well, I don't know. Maybe some of you number junkies will appreciate this. And I'm going to show you, if everything cooperates correctly, which of course it does not want to. The numbers that I crunched for all of this, and just going to show some of the more important races, I guess, or at least the less obvious races. I've been jibber-jabbering quite a bit about, the numbers are tight here, the numbers are tight there. And I would like to show you guys a little bit of that information. All right, so here's the spreadsheet I put together on the governors, and we'll just highlight a few. So you had Lake, and you can see where that average is theoretically against her. However, I think that's actually not going to be the case. I think after her latest media showings, she's just going to dominate entirely. DeSantis with Florida, Christ's campaign manager just got arrested for domestic violence. And just to kind of give you an idea of how I'm looking at some of these numbers, if it's under essentially 3% and below, I consider it a close race. So you have Kansas with Schmidt. He has the benefit of being an incumbent. Michigan with Dixon. And again, I think Whitmer will probably eke out a win because she's an incumbent, but things are possibly going to switch. Nevada, Lombardo. And New Amsterdam with Hochul, if something major pops economically, I could see that changing. I genuinely could. Oregon with Drazen, again, 11th hour, something could happen. And Wisconsin going to Michaels. Well, we'll just see how this plays out. And then we go over to Senators. Nice and messy here on the spreadsheets. So, oh yeah, I forgot to mention Britt for Alabama, but there's no polling. Arizona for Masters. I think that's going to be a squeaker, to be quite honest. That's going to go down to the absolute wire. Colorado for O'Day. It probably won't go for O'Day, but I thought it would be fun to be controversial. Florida for Rubio, solid lock. Georgia, we've already mentioned, that's going to go down to basically a snipe fest afterwards. Bold Duck, probably not, but let's be optimistic. Let's go for broke. Ohio for Vance, while on paper it's controversial, I think it's going to actually go his way probably more solidly than these polls are actually predicting. Same with Oz in Pennsylvania. Mike Lee in Utah. Honestly, with the amount of polling that was given, it's 5 polls. I think he's going to win handily. And Johnson in Wisconsin, we'll find out. But that is the big Bleach-stradamus moment. And one that I think is going to be an interesting election night. So hopefully you all will be interested in joining me on that night. There's going to be significantly better coverage, but I figured we'd do a little bit of something, because I know Styx has Sleazy P Martini on. And I'm sure Tim Pool will be doing something, God knows what. And overall, I've got to say, it's going to be a fascinating night. I think things are going to go in many different directions than are expected. And it's going to be under a lot closer scrutiny than previous elections. So hopefully you all will join me next time, and I will catch you later. Bleach out. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, there you go.